What would you do if the person living just a few doors away from you was hiding something so horrifying that once the truth came out, an entire city struggled to believe it? On the surface, there was nothing unusual about the apartment building. People walked through the hallways carrying groceries. Doors opened and closed. Televisions played behind thin walls. Music drifted through the building at night. Neighbors passed one another with quick greetings and short conversations. Ordinary life. Completely ordinary. And that was exactly what made it terrifying. Because evil does not always announce itself. Sometimes it wears normal clothes. Sometimes it smiles politely. Sometimes it lives right next door. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Summer, 1991. The city moved at its usual pace. Cars rolled through intersections. Restaurants filled with customers. People woke up, went to work, returned home, and prepared for another ordinary evening. Meanwhile, inside a building on North 25th Street, people had started noticing something strange. A smell. Not once. Not twice. Repeatedly. It lingered in hallways. It drifted beneath doors. Sometimes stronger. Sometimes weaker. But always there. People complained about it. Some tenants assumed plumbing issues. Others blamed spoiled food. Maybe rotten meat. Maybe garbage. Maybe something trapped in the walls. There always seemed to be an explanation. At least, that was what everyone wanted to believe. Because human beings naturally search for ordinary answers. We tell ourselves uncomfortable things have simple causes. We tell ourselves strange events make sense. We tell ourselves there must be some mistake. And inside apartment 213, a man named Jeffrey Dahmer continued living his life. Quietly. He wasn't loud. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't the kind of person people pointed at and whispered about. Many neighbors later described him similarly. Quiet. Polite. Reserved. The kind of person who simply blended in. And blending in can be powerful. Because people often remember the loudest person in a room. Not the quiet one sitting alone. Not the person nobody notices. Jeffrey worked various jobs over the years and spent much of his time alone. But beneath the surface, another reality was growing. A reality nobody around him fully understood. A reality hidden behind a simple apartment door. Days passed. Then weeks. The strange smell remained. Sometimes neighbors mentioned it in passing. Sometimes maintenance workers checked around. Excuses appeared. Jeffrey reportedly explained it away. Spoiled food. Fish gone bad. Problems with the freezer. Small explanations. Tiny answers. Enough to stop people from asking deeper questions. Enough to make life continue. For a while. But something else had begun happening. People started remembering odd encounters. Small moments. The kind of moments that seem meaningless at first. Until later. Until after the truth emerges. Then suddenly every memory changes. Every strange feeling returns. Every uncomfortable interaction feels different. One neighbor remembered unusual noises. Another remembered unsettling behavior. Another simply remembered feeling uneasy. Not enough to accuse anyone. Not enough to call police. Just feelings. And feelings are difficult to explain. Imagine meeting someone and feeling something isn't right, while having absolutely no reason to believe it. So you ignore it. You move on. You continue with your day. Most people do. Because ordinary life teaches us to dismiss our instincts. Jeffrey kept living quietly. Walking outside. Shopping. Speaking casually with neighbors. Appearing completely normal. And if someone had walked past him on the street, they probably wouldn't have looked twice. That was part of the horror. Not because he looked frightening. Because he didn't. Meanwhile, Milwaukee kept moving. Days blended together. Morning became evening. Evening became morning. And apartment 213 remained just another apartment door in a building full of apartment doors. But inside, things were becoming increasingly disturbing. Hidden from everyone else. Locked away. Unknown. And eventually, a series of events would begin moving toward a moment nobody could stop. Because sometimes the truth stays hidden for years. And sometimes, it begins with something very small. A smell. Just a smell. The kind of thing people complain about and forget. The kind of thing people assume someone else will deal with. The kind of thing nobody imagines could become the beginning of one of America's most disturbing criminal cases. And only a short distance away, someone was about to make a decision that would change everything. Someone frightened. Someone desperate. Someone running. And before the night ended, Jeffrey Dahmer's carefully hidden world would begin collapsing around him. But nobody knew that yet. Not the neighbors. Not the city. Not even the police. Because the worst discoveries are often sitting quietly in places people walk past every day. Night had already settled over Milwaukee. Street lights reflected off wet pavement. Apartment windows glowed across the city like scattered stars. Inside homes, people were eating dinner, watching television, preparing for another ordinary night. And several blocks away, someone was running. Barefoot. Terrified. Confused. 19-year-old Konorak Synthesomphon stumbled through the streets in a state of panic. He wasn't walking. He wasn't simply trying to get somewhere. He was trying to escape. Witnesses would later remember seeing a young boy wandering through the neighborhood. He appeared disoriented. Frightened. Something felt wrong immediately. People stopped. They looked. And then they looked again. Because there are moments when something deep inside tells you reality isn't matching what you're seeing. This was one of those moments. Nearby women noticed him first. They approached carefully. "Are you okay?" No answer. Or at least, not one that made sense. He seemed terrified. He seemed unable to explain what was happening. And before anyone fully understood the situation, another man appeared. Jeffrey Dahmer. Calm. Controlled. Walking toward them. No panic. No urgency. Just calm. He explained that the young man was his friend. He explained that they had been arguing. He explained that everything was fine. Simple explanations. Again. Always explanations. The women immediately felt something wasn't right. Something felt off. Very off. They reportedly argued. They insisted something was wrong. They refused to simply walk away. And then police arrived. For a moment, everything hung in the balance. Imagine that moment. Imagine standing there knowing that somewhere beneath the surface something feels terribly wrong but having no proof. Police looked at Jeffrey. Jeffrey looked back calmly. No shaking hands. No nervous behavior. No obvious signs. Nothing screaming danger. Just another man speaking normally. And normal can be incredibly convincing. Jeffrey spoke calmly. He reportedly told officers they were lovers. He reportedly insisted it was simply a domestic disagreement. The women protested. No. No. Something isn't right. But uncertainty has power. Because once doubt enters a situation, everything becomes harder. Officers looked at the frightened teenager. They looked at Jeffrey. And then, they made a decision. A decision that would later become one of the most heavily criticized moments connected to the case. They escorted Konorak back into apartment 213. Back through the hallway. Back through the door. Back inside. The women stood outside in disbelief. Something inside them still screamed that something was wrong. They called again. They tried again. But the door had already closed. And sometimes a closing door changes everything. Inside the apartment, silence returned. Outside, life continued. Cars passed. People walked home. Televisions played. Milwaukee kept breathing. Completely unaware of what had just happened. Hours later, Jeffrey sat quietly. No alarms. No police surrounding the building. No dramatic confrontation. Nothing. Because the danger had walked right past everyone. And nobody had stopped it. But strange things kept happening around apartment 213. Neighbors continued noticing odors. Maintenance workers occasionally entered for repairs. And each time, Jeffrey seemed to have an explanation ready. Spoiled food. Fish. Freezer problems. Excuses stacked upon excuses. Yet some people later admitted something else disturbed them. Not just the smell. The feeling. The feeling that something around Jeffrey seemed empty. Cold. Like there was some invisible distance between him and everyone else. But again, feelings aren't evidence. People second-guess themselves. People tell themselves they're imagining things. People continue living. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. And Jeffrey continued moving through life almost invisibly. Walking into stores. Buying groceries. Going to work. Returning home. Completely ordinary. Completely forgettable. And maybe that's one of the most unsettling parts of all this. Because many people imagine monsters differently. People imagine wild eyes. Strange behavior. Dark music playing in the background. Some obvious signal. But real life rarely works that way. Sometimes horrifying things hide behind routines. Behind small conversations. behind neighbors saying hello in hallways. Meanwhile, inside apartment 213, the hidden world remained hidden. Until July 22, 1991. The day everything finally changed. The day Jeffrey Dahmer's carefully built reality began collapsing. It started with another young man, Tracy Edwards. Jeffrey approached him with an offer. Money, conversation, photos, simple things. Nothing unusual on the surface. And Tracy agreed. At first, they entered apartment 213 together. And at first, nothing immediately looked horrifying. Not immediately, but almost instantly, something felt wrong. Very wrong. Tracy later described feeling uneasy. Not because of one specific thing. Not because of one obvious detail. Just a feeling. A feeling that started growing. The apartment smelled strange. Stronger than expected. There were odd objects around. Odd energy. Odd tension. Jeffrey's behavior seemed different. Subtle changes. Tiny things. But tiny things matter. Sometimes survival begins with noticing tiny things. Conversations became uncomfortable. Jeffrey's behavior became more unpredictable. And suddenly, Tracy realized something terrifying. He didn't think he was free to leave. Not anymore. Fear began rising. Quietly. Slowly. Then faster. Imagine realizing you're inside a room. With someone. And suddenly every instinct inside your body starts screaming. Imagine your brain trying to explain it away. No. No. It's probably nothing. Until eventually, you stop lying to yourself. Tracy later said he became convinced Jeffrey intended to hurt him. And suddenly one thought took over everything else. Get out. No matter what. Get out. But escaping is easier imagined than done. Especially when panic starts taking over. Especially when you don't know what the other person might do. Especially when you're trapped. Inside apartment 213, the atmosphere changed completely. And for the first time in years, Jeffrey Dahmer was about to lose control. Because Tracy wasn't planning to become another victim. He was planning to survive. And in just a few moments, one desperate decision, one sudden movement, would send police racing back toward apartment 213. Toward a door they had entered before. Toward a place they thought they understood. Toward a discovery, so horrifying, that hardened investigators would struggle to process what they were seeing. Apartment 213 had remained hidden for years. Behind that simple door, behind those ordinary walls, behind a quiet man neighbors barely noticed, secrets had lived undisturbed. But now, everything was beginning to fall apart. Inside the apartment, Tracy Edwards knew one thing. He had to get out. Nothing else mattered. Not explanations. Not confusion. Not fear. Just escape. Jeffrey stood nearby. The tension inside the room felt unbearable. Every second felt longer. Every movement felt dangerous. Tracy's mind raced. Because when people face real fear, time changes. Seconds stretch. Thoughts collide. Instinct takes over. And eventually, he saw an opportunity. A tiny one. But sometimes survival only needs one moment. One chance. One opening. Tracy moved suddenly. Fast. Very fast. Chaos exploded inside the apartment. Furniture shifted. Bodies struggled. And before Jeffrey could regain control, Tracy broke free. He ran. Out the apartment. Out the building. Out into the night. And he didn't stop. Barefoot. Terrified. Adrenaline surging through his body. People later described him running through the streets in handcuffs, desperately searching for help. Then finally, he found police officers. Breathing heavily, terrified, barely able to explain what had happened, Tracy told them something was wrong. Very wrong. At first, officers likely couldn't fully understand what they were walking into. They had heard strange calls before. Arguments. Disputes. Confused stories. But something about Tracy felt different. Something about the fear in his voice. So officers followed him. Back toward the apartment building. Back toward apartment 213. Back toward Jeffrey Dahmer. Meanwhile Jeffrey waited. And for perhaps the first time in years, panic had begun creeping in. Not visible panic. Not screaming. Not chaos. But underneath that calm exterior, he had to know something. His world was collapsing. Police entered the apartment. Jeffrey reportedly tried remaining calm. Again. Always calm. Always controlled. Always explanations. He spoke casually. He attempted to cooperate. But things felt different now. Very different. Officers began looking around. One officer noticed a set of photographs near the bed. At first glance, they looked strange. Then he looked closer. Then closer again. And suddenly, everything changed. Because the photographs were horrifying. There was no misunderstanding. No confusion. No simple explanation. No spoiled food excuse. No plumbing problem. No mistake. Just reality. One officer later described realizing immediately what he was looking at. And suddenly his voice cut through the apartment. These are real. Everything exploded into movement. Jeffrey attempted to run. But officers quickly stopped him. Handcuffs clicked shut. And for the first time, Jeffrey Dahmer lost control completely. Police immediately began searching the apartment. What they discovered shocked everyone involved. Even experienced investigators. Even people who had spent years seeing difficult things. Room by room, drawer by drawer. The reality hidden behind apartment 213 emerged. And the deeper investigators looked, the worse things became. Officers moved carefully. Slowly. Silence filled the apartment. Because nobody wanted to say out loud what they were beginning to understand. Nobody wanted to believe it. But reality doesn't disappear simply because people wish it would. Outside, police vehicles gathered. Word started spreading. Neighbors watched from windows. People stood outside wondering what was happening. Confused faces. Curious faces. Concerned faces. Nobody understood the truth yet. Not fully. Because how could they? How could anyone imagine something like this happening just a few feet away? How could anyone process the idea that they had passed this apartment countless times? That they had lived beside him? Spoken to him? Seen him walking through hallways? As dawn approached, the story began moving through Milwaukee. Then faster. Then even faster. Phones rang. Newsrooms scrambled. Reporters rushed to gather information. And gradually, people began hearing the truth. Jeffrey Dahmer had been arrested. At first people struggled to believe it. No, not him. Not that quiet man. Not the person neighbors remembered. Not the ordinary guy from apartment 213. But piece by piece, the reality became impossible to deny. And when the public learned more, shock spread across the city, then across America. Because suddenly people weren't asking, who is Jeffrey Dahmer? They were asking, how did nobody know? How did someone hide something so horrifying for so long? How did people miss it? How did warning signs disappear into ordinary life? And perhaps most frightening of all, how many times had people stood close to danger without realizing it? The questions never stopped. Years later, those questions still remain. Because the Jeffrey Dahmer case became more than just a criminal case. It became a nightmare hiding inside normal life. People began looking differently at apartment hallways, at neighbors, at ordinary routines. Because one of the hardest truths to accept is this: danger doesn't always look dangerous. Sometimes it looks ordinary. Sometimes it says hello. Sometimes it smiles politely. Sometimes it quietly lives next door. And perhaps the most heartbreaking part of all this story wasn't simply what happened. It was the lives that were lost. Real people. Real families. Real futures. People with dreams. People with loved ones waiting for them. People who should have grown older. People who should still be here. Behind every headline. Behind every documentary. Behind every news report. There were human beings. Human beings whose stories ended far too soon. As years passed, apartment 213 eventually disappeared. The building itself would later be demolished. Brick by brick. Wall by wall. As if physically removing it could somehow erase what happened there. But places don't carry evil. People do. And destroying walls doesn't destroy memories. Even today, when people hear the name Jeffrey Dahmer, many immediately think about horror. About fear. About shock. But maybe there's another lesson hidden beneath everything. Maybe the story isn't simply about one man. Maybe it's also about paying attention. About listening when something feels wrong. About understanding that instincts sometimes exist for a reason. Because years before police opened that apartment door, there had been strange moments. Strange smells. Strange feelings. Small warnings. Tiny pieces. Pieces that only made sense afterward. And that's the frightening thing about real life. Sometimes the biggest stories begin quietly. No dramatic music. No flashing signs. Just small things. Things people ignore. Things people explain away. Things people forget. Until one day, the truth forces everyone to look back and ask, were the signs there all along?